The city exhaled a cold, gray breath against the glass, each drop of rain a hurried, ticking clock counting down the seconds of a day Leo already wished was over. His world was the sterile blue-white glow of a monitor, a universe of hard facts and sharp angles where stories were not found, but dismantled. He was a surgeon of words, and sentiment was a disease he excised with brutal precision. His latest article lay nearly finished on the screen, a masterpiece of cynicism that stripped a local hero down to his bare, unimpressive bones. It was good work. It was clean. It was empty. The phone buzzed, a jarring intrusion into his controlled silence. It was his editor, a voice that always sounded like rustling paper and stale coffee. The assignment was a fluff piece, a throwaway story for the back pages. A baker in a town so small it was little more than a whisper on the map, a place called Whispering Pines. The man, an old fellow named Elias, supposedly baked bread that unlocked memories. Happy once, Leo felt a familiar, weary sigh build in his chest. He saw the story laid out before him, a sentimental hoax propped up by small-town boredom, a perfect target for his brand of truth. He would go, he would observe, he would politely and methodically pull the whole thing apart, and he would be back in his world of concrete and consequence by the weekend. The drive was a slow bleed from gray to green. The relentless grid of the city gave way to the soft, unpredictable curves of country roads. Towering buildings were replaced by ancient trees that leaned over the asphalt as if sharing secrets. The light itself seemed to change, losing its harsh, electric edge and softening into a warm, golden hue. Leo kept the windows up, the air conditioning a sterile bubble against the encroaching world of nature. His podcast, a cacophony of political outrage and economic disaster, was his anchor to the reality he understood. But the further he drove, the more the signal wavered, crackling and fading until it was swallowed completely by the profound, unnerving silence of the countryside. He was an island of resistance in a sea of calm, his skepticism the only luggage he had bothered to pack. Whispering Pines didn't announce itself with a sign so much as it simply began. The road narrowed, slowing to a gentle pace, and suddenly he was in it. Cobblestone streets, storefronts with hand-painted signs, the warm spill of light from windows where people lived lives, not just occupied spaces. His sleek, modern car felt like a scar on the idyllic picture. He parked it, and the silence that greeted him was thicker, warmer than the one in the car. It was a living silence, woven with the distant chime of a bell and the rustle of leaves. At the inn, a woman with a smile as warm as the worn wooden counter greeted him by the name on his reservation, her voice soft and genuine. When he mentioned his assignment, her smile deepened. "Ah, Elias," she said, her tone full of a quiet reverence. "His bread is the heart of this town." Leo just nodded, his own smile a thin, professional veneer, a mask he was beginning to find heavy. The Golden Loaf Bakery was not a business. It was a sanctuary. The air inside was a tangible thing, thick with the scent of yeast and cinnamon, of baked crust and something else, something like nostalgia itself. The light was the color of honey, falling in soft pools on the worn wooden floor, and the shelves lined with beautiful, rustic loaves. It was less a shop and more a warm, beating heart. Behind the counter stood a man who seemed to have grown from the very floorboards of the place. He was old, his face a kind and gentle map of wrinkles, his eyes holding a light that was both wise and deeply peaceful. A fine dusting of flour covered his apron and the backs of his hands like a soft, permanent frost. This was Elias. Leo entered with his notebook out, a shield and a weapon, his mind already forming the sharp, incisive questions he would use to peel back the layers of this charming facade. But Elias didn't see a journalist. He saw a person. He greeted Leo with a simple, unassuming nod and gestured toward a small table. "You look like you've had a long journey," the old baker said, his voice as warm and gentle as the air around them. "Tea." Leo was momentarily thrown. He was prepared for a defense, for a sales pitch, for a carefully crafted narrative. He was not prepared for simple, unconditional kindness. He accepted the tea, the warmth of the mug seeping into his cold hands, and for the first time, His professional armor felt less like a protection and more like a cage. He spent the afternoon collecting his evidence. He spoke to a young woman who, with tears in her eyes, described how a bite of Elias's rye bread had brought back the sound of her father's laughter, a sound she hadn't heard in 10 years. He interviewed an old man who sat on a bench, a small loaf in his lap, and told Leo how the taste of sourdough always brought him back to the day he proposed to his wife in this very town square, the sun warm on their faces. Leo recorded it all, every sentimental detail, every tearful testimony. He cataloged their stories like a scientist collecting specimens, searching for the common thread, the psychological trigger, the rational explanation that would neatly tie it all together. But the stories, in their earnest and heartfelt simplicity, resisted his logic. They were all different, yet all the same, pointing to a truth his cynical mind could not grasp. As the day drew to a close, he returned to the bakery, determined to get a straight answer. The last of the golden afternoon light streamed through the front window. "What's the secret?" Leo asked, his tone more blunt than he intended. "What's in the bread?" Elias was wiping down the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. He paused and looked at Leo, a gentle, knowing smile touching his lips. "There is no secret to tell," he said softly. "It is only flour and water, salt and thyme. But you can watch if you like. Before the sun rises." The invitation hung in the air, a quiet challenge. Leo, the seeker of facts, the debunker of myths, felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt all day. Intrigue. He would come, he would watch, and he would find the trick. The bakery was a different world before the sun. It was a place of deep shadows and soft, hallowed silence, broken only by the gentle sigh of the old wooden floorboards. Leo stood in the doorway of the kitchen, a ghost in a world that felt ancient and sacred. He had come expecting to find a trick, a hidden ingredient or a theatrical flourish that would explain the town's sentimental delusion. But there was nothing to see, nothing but an old man and his craft. Elias moved not with the efficiency of a tradesman, but with the quiet grace of a monk tending a garden. His hands, dusted with a fine layer of flour, seemed to know the dough intimately, as if they were old friends engaged in a silent conversation. He didn't measure with cups and spoons, but with the cup of his palm and the weight of his own intuition. A cascade of white flour fell like a soft winter snow onto the vast wooden table, and Elias's fingers danced through it, light and purposeful. There was no rush in his movements, no sense of urgency. The world outside, with its deadlines and demands, simply didn't exist in this room. Here, time was measured in the patient rise of the dough, in the slow, rhythmic folding and turning, a gentle lullaby of creation. Leo watched, his reporter's notebook forgotten in his pocket. His skepticism a heavy coat he suddenly wished he could shrug off. The air grew thick with the sweet, earthy scent of yeast awakening, a smell so profoundly comforting it felt like a memory in itself. Elias worked on, his breathing slow and steady, a quiet rhythm that seemed to infuse the very dough beneath his hands. He wasn't just making bread. He was tending to a small, living thing, coaxing it into its fullest expression. He would pause, his head tilted, as if listening for a secret whisper from the dough, a silent signal that it was ready for the next step. The first hint of dawn painted the window panes in hues of soft lavender and gray, and the kitchen began to fill with a gentle, ethereal light. It caught the flour dust in the air, making it sparkle like 1,000 tiny stars. Elias shaped the loaves with a final, loving touch, his hands moving over the smooth, taut skin of the dough as if offering a blessing. He slid them into the cavernous brick oven, the iron door closing with a soft, definitive thud. And then, there was only the waiting. A profound and peaceful stillness settled over the room, the only sound the quiet crackle of the fire within the oven's heart. It was in that silence that Leo felt it, a loosening in his chest, a crack in the cynical armor he had worn for so long. The magic wasn't in the bread. The magic was in the quiet devotion of its making. When Elias finally opened the oven, a wave of warmth and the most incredible aroma washed over the room, a scent of hearth and home and things long forgotten. The loaves were a deep, perfect gold, Their crusts crackled into a beautiful, intricate map. Elias lifted one, his face illuminated by the oven's glow, and placed it on the table. The sound it made was a crisp, delicate music. He took a knife, and as he sliced into the loaf, a plume of steam erupted, warm and fragrant, fogging the cool morning air. He held the slice out to Leo, a simple offering, his eyes holding a gentle, knowing light. It was just bread, piece of baked dough. But as Leo reached out to take it, his hand trembling slightly, he knew he was about to taste more than just bread. He was about to taste a memory. He took a bite. The crust was crisp, the inside soft and warm and slightly sour. It was simple. It was perfect. And then it happened. The taste bloomed on his tongue and a door in his mind, a door he hadn't known was there, creaked open. The sterile bakery faded away, replaced by the golden light of a different kitchen, a different time. He was small, no older than 6, his feet dangling high above the floor from a wooden chair. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating a million dancing dust motes. And there were hands, his grandmother's hands, wrinkled and kind, slicing a loaf of bread that looked and smelled and felt just like this one. He could feel the warmth of that long-ago sun on his face, hear the sound of her quiet humming, feel the overwhelming, unconditional safety of her love. It was a memory he hadn't just forgotten. It was a memory he had buried, a foundation stone of his life that had been covered over by years of disappointment and disillusionment. Back in the bakery, a single tear traced a path through the flour dust on his cheek. He looked at the bread in his hand, this impossible bridge to a lost world, and then at the old baker. He didn't have to speak. Elias was simply smiling, a smile of pure, uncomplicated understanding. "My grandmother," Leo whispered, his voice cracking, the words feeling foreign and holy in his mouth. He sat at the small wooden table as the sun rose higher, bathing the bakery in a warm, forgiving light. The slice of bread sat in his hands, a sacred object now. Elias moved around the kitchen, the quiet, rhythmic sounds of his work a gentle comfort. He didn't press, didn't ask questions. He simply gave Leo the space to find his way back. After a long silence, the old baker brought 2 more cups of tea to the table and sat down. "The bread doesn't make the memory, my boy," Elias said, his voice a soft murmur. "It only reminds the heart where it was left." And in that simple sentence, Leo understood. It wasn't magic. It was connection. It was the love baked into the bread that had called out to the love stored in his heart. It was the honesty of the craft that had broken through the dishonesty of his own life. Back in his room at the inn, he opened his laptop. The cynical, half-finished article stared back at him, its words sharp, clever, and utterly false. He highlighted the entire text and, with a single satisfying click, deleted it all. A blank page stared back at him, a new beginning, and he began to type. The words that came were not his usual words. They were softer, warmer. They spoke of the quiet dignity of craft, of the way a simple loaf of bread can carry the weight of a human heart, of the memories that lie sleeping within us, waiting for a taste of home to call them back. He wasn't writing an exposé. He was writing a testimony. He was telling the truth, not the facts. When it was time to leave, he drove through the town not with the hurried pace of an escape, but with the slow reverence of a pilgrim. He stopped at the bakery one last time. Elias was waiting, and he handed Leo a full loaf, still warm from the oven, wrapped in simple brown paper. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. As Leo drove away, the loaf sat on the passenger seat beside him, filling the car with its warm, honest scent. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the small town receding behind him, a place he had come to dismantle, but which had instead put him back together. He came looking for a story to pick apart, but he was leaving with one that had made him